I'm Susie.
And I'm Lisa, and this is the Coaching Cast. We're the no-nonsense podcast chatting about the things impacting you at work right now, helping you to survive and thrive in today's ever-changing workplace.
We discuss different topics in each episode, sharing our ideas, hints, and top tips from our experiences of working in the corporate world, running our own businesses, and also being qualified coaches. We try to have a few laughs along the way too, because, well, quite frankly, taking yourself too seriously is just boring. We hope you enjoy listening. Today's episode, we have a very special guest joining us, Sam Isaacson. Sam is an award-winning coaching thought leader and consultant. He is a writer and founder of the Coachtech Collective, a global community of coaches grappling with the cutting edge of technology. And he is here today to chat to us about technology's impact on the future of the workplace and leadership. So stay with us and enjoy. Sam, welcome to the Coaching Cast. I think, as we've previously mentioned to you, we're big fans of your work here. Lisa in particular has been admiring your work from afar for a while. And I know you wrote a great article in the Association of Coaching magazine last year, which Lisa and I also contribute to. So we're really, really privileged to have you here on the Coaching Cast today, talking about technology and its impact on the world of work and leadership. So welcome.
Yeah, no, the privilege is mine. It's great to join you in this conversation. And, it's a conversation I love having. So I'm excited about this.
Brilliant. We're excited too, because we honestly don't know very much about this topic, hence why we've invited you on. So we're like sponges as well today, as well as our listeners, to learn and understand a little bit more. So firstly, if you could just tell our listeners a little bit more about how you got into supporting and consulting on this topic.
Yes, well, my career started in the world of technology risk consulting. And so I spent a long time looking at everything that can go wrong with IT, basically across a whole wide range of environments. You end up having to specialize, and I ended up specializing in the world of technology change risk. So my job, more often than not, was going into an organization that was experiencing a failing IT project, which is all of them, pretty much.
I've been in a lot of those.
Well, I mean, everyone, we've all experienced an IT project that isn't going quite the way that it ought to be, whether it's overruns in cost or that the system just doesn't feel right once you kind of get it in. There's lots of stuff that can go wrong. And so my job was to go around, find out what had gone wrong, and then help the organization to make that not happen in the future. And effectively what I learned very quickly was that the problem was almost never with the technology itself. I don't think I found that a single time, actually. It often wasn't to do with the processes that they were following. They'd got processes out of a textbook based on their good experience, and they tended to be following those. The problem was being experienced in the people. So as soon as you introduced people into this system, then start to go wrong. People would miscommunicate or just protect their own back rather than working for the benefit of the whole. And so I got interested in the whole sort of psychology of change and how people communicate in organizational systems. And that, long story short, led to me sort of looking into the world of coaching. And then I sort of migrated from the world of technology risk into coaching in the 2010s. And then towards the end of the 2010s, it just so happened that Open University Press was looking for somebody to write a book about the impact of technology on coaching.
Okay.
I knew about technology, I knew about organizations, I knew about coaching. And so I sort of combined those three to write a book. And the experience you have when you write a book is you end up becoming quite knowledgeable about the thing you're writing about. It doesn't happen the other way around. You start by knowing and then you write. And so then I sort of ended up sort of stumbling into this niche where I think a lot about what's the impact of technology on coaching. And yeah, of course, in the last couple of years since ChatGPT was launched, AI has become a really mainstream topic, and there's lots of questions and jargon and myths associated with it, and a lot of fear and other emotions. And so it's a really fascinating conversation to be a part of. And I think it's really important that we engaging a conversation in an informed way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you touched on there about kind of just raising awareness, understanding is really critical. I think in the preparation for this interview today, Lisa and I have been quite honest that we have differing experiences, actually, both from a coaching perspective and also in terms of running our own businesses, around how we both individually use some technology, for example, AI, to enhance what we deliver from a business operations perspective, but also in terms of what we actually do as well in coaching. So and unless we'd kind of had this conversation, I probably wouldn't have known that about Lisa, and Lisa wouldn't have known that about me, because it's not something we kind of have talked about yet. But I think it's becoming more and more prominent in our society. More people are understanding about it, knowing about it, dipping their toe in, maybe in terms of use as well. So, it's huge. And I think, AI and technology are transforming workplaces at an unprecedented pace. So on that, what are some of the most significant changes that you're seeing through your work?
Well, I think the experience for most people in organizations at the moment is it's like this complex mix of of the experience of any individual technology sort of being adopted. So when you look at one specific example of a technology like voice assistance, speaking to your phone or to a device, that is going to follow a natural adoption cycle where a couple of people start to adopt it and experiment with it, and then a few more do, and then it hits this tipping point where it suddenly becomes acceptable, and then a lot of people will start to adopt it, and then you've got this final group that don't adopt it until they're absolutely forced to.
Yeah.
And you see this across every sort of innovation. It's not just technology, it's in societal change as well, but in the adoption of technology is quite measurable. You can see, there's this point at which it moves from being an innovator stage to an early adopter stage to an early majority stage. That's the diffusion of innovation model. And what we think happens, in our heads when we sort of think about that, what we think happens in organizations is that we introduce a piece of technology and it goes through this cycle, and we have a change program to sort of help people adopt it. And what happens in reality is that there are lots and lots of different sorts of pieces of technology that are all emerging in the market, and some of them are going to end up being adopted more widely, and some of them aren't. And the organizations that adopt the technology the fastest, that ends up being adopted the most widely, end up with a competitive advantage.
Okay.
The ones that wait too late end up with a disadvantage. And there's this risk factor where actually you could adopt something that looks like it's going to be the next big thing, and then it just doesn't, or it takes ages for it to tip over. A good example of that is like virtual reality headsets, where that's been at a sort of innovator early adopter stage for decades, and the technology keeps on getting better, and there's lots of companies that sort of move in and invest and then lose all of their money and sort of pull out. And so in an organizational context, you've just got this mess all of the time when new technologies are appearing, and then some of them are disappearing and some of them are getting adopted, and you've still got your legacy systems that you're holding on to because they're stable and you're very cautious about changing them, but because they're so old, they're more likely to go wrong when something changes in the surrounding environment. So it's basically, it's just this perfect storm where you almost can't do anything right, and that there is no organization that is immune to it. It doesn't matter how young or old you are. So yeah, there's a lot that can go wrong, and the solution is in being agile as individuals and sort of working together in a collaborative, transparent community that is transparent with each other about how I'm feeling about this new technology, and making sure that we sort of know what's possible and what isn't. So
yeah, I think that's so true. That's definitely my experience of technology delivery in big organizations. So it's interesting what you said at the start, really, Sam, about like your career to this point and what you've been involved in, because any big tech change that I've ever been a part of has usually fallen over because of a lack of communication between people, and a lack of transparency around that comment you just made then around actually how are people feeling. Because so often I find with technology change, but I think it's true of any change really, is that because everyone feels so differently about it at any given time in the process of the change, we ourselves will become resistant to it rather than, in terms of we become resistant to it in ourselves rather than the system not being accessible to us. Does that make sense? Like, it's not that there's anything necessarily wrong with the system or it's not user friendly, or it's just we've already made a decision usually about it, and then before we then hold ourselves back from being engaged in it. And I feel that way now with the AI piece. That's definitely something I'm recognizing in myself so acutely, that I have an internal resistance to it because I just don't like the sound of it very much.
Right.
But there's literally no there's like no logic in it, which I know. I'm
So you're not seeking to understand.
not well. Do you know what I am? And I am because of Sam. Because I listened to Sam on a podcast last year, and it was really interesting, and it spoke to me because Sam was talking about coaching and technology in that conversation. You were talking about AI, and you were talking about how many of us reacted in COVID when we were suddenly forced to work online. And that was me. So before COVID, I only did face-to-face coaching. And then during COVID, I had absolutely no choice. So I jumped on a video call, and the rest is history, because now I only really do virtual, and it's transformed my coaching for the better. But I found your points around that really interesting. And the AI piece is the same for me. Like, stop resisting it, you know, explore it. But I find that the psychological piece around change just so interesting.
Well, I think, look, there's so much that is going on here because when the way that we use technology, it is part of our experience, and it's like having a job restructure. And when we're thinking about, we're going to restructure this team and we're going to make these roles redundant and you're going to be moving into a different role and you're changing this, we have such strong processes to protect against like what that process is going to feel like. And there are also different ways to approach it, but we think about it very carefully. But with technology, it's almost like we feel like, oh, we're going to switch from Gmail to Outlook. No worries, you're still using email. But actually now all of the buttons are in different places. The menus feel different. You know, you can't do some of the things. And so if the way that you're structuring your day, and I mean, email is a perfect example. We often structure our day around how we're managing our email. That is a really significant change. We're effectively changing the jobs of everybody in the organization in one fell swoop. And we don't tend to think about it through that carefully. And more than that, right, you know, when you're setting out at the beginning of some IT project, or what is it that this system's going to deliver, that tends to be dictated based on a set of requirements that are in on some document somewhere. And that document might be signed off by everybody in the entire world. It doesn't particularly matter. It doesn't, you don't know exactly what it's going to be like until you're using it. The feel of using a system isn't the same as just a tick list that says, oh, you can do these things on it. And then we've got the fact that our personalities are different. So some of that, there's a really amusing quote, I don't know it word for word, but Douglas Adams said that something like, technology that is invented up to the age of 18, like up to the point that you're 18, you see as boring and mundane, it's just ordinary. Technology that's invented between the ages of 18 and 35, you see it's exciting and maybe you could form a career based off it. And technology that's invented after you're 35 is a threat. And that's pretty true, I think. So
that's where I am.
Right. And so I think, you know, I'm a coach. And so I think a lot about, well, what does technology mean in the coaching space? And I think that just that age thing, which of course is not universally true, but it's probably pretty close. Something that we are engaged with, and coaches do tend to be older than their clients as a general rule. It's not, again, not universally true, but as a general rule, what that means is a piece of technology that's appearing is quite likely to appear quite threatening to us, but for somebody else, it will feel exciting. Or it'll be exciting for us, and for them, it'll feel very boring. You know, why are you even interested? Why is on-demand TV? Why do you think that's so cool? Like everybody does that. But for those of us that grew up in the 90s, where you had
with the terrestrial.
When you had to run, when you knew that the episode of Dawson's Creek was about to start and you were racing to make sure you watched it because you would never see it otherwise. That was my life at 14. That's
Right,
very
yeah.
true.
And that changes our psychology as well. It's all kind
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
of that.
So
So
essentially what you're saying, Sam, is I've become my parents.
yeah, yes, we all. Yeah.
Well, we've had Robin Terry on this podcast, and that's not
We have
necessarily a
had my
bad
dad.
thing.
We have had my
Lisa.
dad. That is true, but then I was explaining to him how Monzo worked yesterday over WhatsApp, and I'm telling you now, that was a couple of hours of my life I'm never going to see again. So, um,
Yeah, do you know what? You raised a really interesting point there around kind of like the experience of tech and how you embrace it, maybe based on what part of the kind of life cycle you're in. Because I have, thinking about my coaching, so I've had the opportunity, not necessarily in my private coaching practice, but working with a coaching organization to experiment using AI in my coaching practice. And to start with, I was really hesitant about it. I was like, I'm not sure this feels kind of like authentic to why I got into coaching, because I got into coaching because I love that like human to human interaction. I love that energy, that engagement. It's quite personal. If you've had professional coaching, some of the things you get into can be quite personal and can be quite vulnerable as well. And that's where you really get breakthrough with people. They start to understand themselves a little bit better, etc. So I definitely was like, I'm not sure about how AI can, benefit in this kind of coaching practice in its traditional sense. But I was like, do you know what? I am gonna give it a go, and I'm gonna like see how this works. And you know what? I found it fascinating because I got to practice with AI. I did a coaching session, human to human, but actually AI was watching what I was doing the whole time. And it had been programmed to look for certain kind of parts of the coaching conversation, to look at what the outcome was. And at the end, it basically kind of gave a report around language that I'd been using, where perhaps my body language didn't link with the words that I was using, or I'd maybe interrupted and not given enough space for the person to answer. And all of a sudden, I had all of this insight into my coaching practice, which I wouldn't have had if I hadn't had that lens applied through kind of the AI piece. And also, the kind of person I was coaching with as well, they were of a slightly younger generation than myself. And they didn't have those kind of those kind of hesitant thoughts around going with it. They were just like, yeah, cool, let's crack on type thing. And I was a bit more hesitant about like, oh, not sure about this. And, what's the ethical consideration about this? And what's this piece over here? This doesn't feel right. And they were just kind of like, yeah, let's just crack on. Because I think they're just, as you said, they are probably a little bit more used, or what's the word I'm looking for? They've probably been in a stage in their career as well where the change in their technological landscape has been so massive and so frequent that they're like, it's just another thing. Like, cool, let's crack on. So yeah, that really resonated with me when you said that.
Yeah, and I think the example that you've just described there is a good example of how we do need to think about maybe it's an ethical thing, or maybe it's just a pragmatic, or is it a philosophy? I don't know what the right word is, but we need to think about what role we're going to give AI in our lives, in our work, in society as a whole. So even some of the comments that you made there, around, you interrupted, weren't giving enough space. That sounds like quite judgmental language, and maybe it's just you sort of talking about yourself because you're
That's
British.
myself. Yeah, that's the way I've interpreted it.
But it's, it's quite common to want AI to come in and give us this advice. So, tell me what I should be doing in this space. And that feels like, why would you want a machine to tell you what?
Yeah,
I think it's super, super helpful for reflective practice. So I've done this by creating it myself using ChatGPT, or there's a tool that I'm involved in developing, aicoach.chat, where
okay.
people go in and sort of have a non-directive conversation with an AI coach, which can
Wow.
act like a coach mentor. But the experience, when people rate the sessions that they've had, the people that give the highest rating at the moment are coaches themselves, because they get they get a real buzz off sort of self-reflection. And this is a tool which sort of accelerates that using on an on-demand system. And so I think we can use AI as a really helpful way to, well, this is the thing that generative AI has brought, really, to turn unstructured information into a structured output. So you can give it a transcript of a coaching conversation or a team meeting that you've led or something like that, and say to it, give me a mark out of 10 for the level of ambition I'm showing. And it will just give you a mark out of 10, and it will be able to quantify how it's got there, and it will do it in seconds. The process that it would take a human to do that same thing, whether or not the quality is the same. But for that, it's so subjective, of course. It would take absolutely ages, but that it instantly gives you a piece of data for you then to sort of take into your reflective practice as a leader, coach, whatever. So that is really exciting for me. It feels like a way that we can introduce sort of new levels of insight in the way that we're looking at ourselves and developing ourselves as leaders and coaches.
Absolutely. And I do a lot of work in sales, because that's where my corporate background was. And I'm thinking now about when you're having sales conversations or building relationships with customers, new or existing, there's a lot there, again, in the same kind of I suppose application around reflective practice, around how you approach that sales conversation, maybe the language that you were using, was that intended, and then the impact that had. It's very much the same in terms of that reflective practice to kind of just help you learn that what you're doing in the moment. When you're in the moment, sometimes you're not aware of what you're doing, because you're so focused on, I'm in this bit now, I've got to move forward to this bit, this is my objective, especially in the sales conversation, because it tends to be a lot more structured. And I think I can easily see how an AI tool or some version of that, again, there's parallels there with how it can help you in your reflective practice to learn and just develop your skills and your awareness of what you're doing in the moment. So interesting. So interesting.
I think it's useful in that sense as well, from what I've understood. Obviously, hold my hands up, I've personally not dabbled in it, but I think it aligns to the point you were making, Sam, there about, where AI is already being so helpful in what it's doing for us and what can be exciting in the here and now, in terms of like that collating and structuring information in a more succinct way. The way I've had it offered to me is around that, when you're trying to yourself come up with ideas in whatever you're doing, it's like that even more advanced level of just putting a word into Google, actually asking it a question and allowing it to collate ideas for you off the back of it, just to help prompt, even if you don't use it, even if it's just to help prompt new thinking, which kind of correlates with what we're talking about with reflective practice, because that in itself gives us new ways to think of things, or new perspectives that give us more information and therefore different choices. It's that same notion of, I need to come up with something new here, or I've got an idea but I can't articulate what I think I want it to say. Let me throw the sense of what I'm working on into this and see what it spits back out, and see if that gives me something new I can work with. Not necessarily lift completely, but work with. I find that quite interesting in that creative process.
Yeah, I think generative AI to help with completing a task that requires you to create some sort of content is just a massive accelerator. So there are two examples that I use for this. One I included in that article in the Coaching Perspectives magazine, where if you need to pull together some content for a workshop, if you give it 3 bullet points and say, hey, you're an L&D professional, you're going to facilitate a workshop, give me some facilitator notes that hit these learning objectives, and it will do it in seconds. Less than a minute, you will have a full set of facilitator notes. And it's basically like having a really well-read, really enthusiastic teenager sitting next to you that you're turning to and asking them to do this job, where actually they're not going to create it perfectly the first time. You're still going to take it and make some tweaks to it and say, oh, okay, this bit isn't relevant, I'll put in my own. It's a framework I want to use, which I'll put in here. But it would take somebody half a day to do that. It would take you several hours, and it gets you to that point in, it is seconds, less than a minute. The other example I use, and this is really helpful for structuring complex emails, or if you're writing articles or something like this, I've started recently telling ChatGPT, I'm going to speak to you just using natural language. I want you to take what I say and then restructure that into real English. Because when we speak, we we talk absolute nonsense. Like when you see it written down, it's not in proper sentences, and it will take it, turn it into sentences. So it's like, yeah, those are my thoughts in the order that I had them, using my own language, but it's good.
Yeah.
It's a really good way to communicate something that's quite complex and turn it into something that is then, able to be communicated.
And what a brilliant way to use it in both of those examples, in the workplace or in any activity you're doing. Because as you say, it helps to accelerate the pace of what we're working on and delivering. So we actually are utilising our time more effectively. And we always all moan that we don't have enough time in the day to do what we want to do. So this is, I think, responding to that. I call it challenge in inverted commas, because my general belief of time is that you have all the time in the world to do the things you want to do. So it's just being specific about what you want to do and how you want to structure it and prioritize it. But at least this type of tool can aid that.
Yeah, look, AI, I think when it is combined with automation. So historically, when the term artificial intelligence has been used, it's sort of meant a whole bunch of different things. And some of it is at the more creative end, like generative AI. Some of it is at the much more sort of linear process driven, if this, then that style automation. And I think people are coming to, marketeers aren't actually. If you look at any technology product, everything now says it's AI, and actually, very little is what we would call generative AI, which is sort of at that end of the spectrum. But in the sort of 80s, 90s, then we saw this, the introduction of more sort of process automation, which then led leaders to be starting to focus more on efficiency over more sort of intuitive leadership practices. The advantage with generative AI is that the sort of efficiency that it gives you is much more, what's the right word? Ambiguous, maybe. So in the 80s and 90s, the sort of efficiency that you could get, I mean, this is right up to the 2010s, you had to have an extremely structured process. So you can set up rules in your email, for example. I want you to automatically categorize every email from this particular person as a red category, so that I can instantly see everything that's connected with this project or something. And you can get that quite complex by stating, oh, if it's got these words in it, if it comes from this person, if it's at this particular type of day, loads of different rules, but it has to be rules based. So if anything comes in and there's a spelling mistake, it'll miss it. Or if it comes from somebody and it's come from their personal email instead of their work email, it'll miss it.
Yeah.
But generative AI can understand that within the context of the fact that humans are unpredictable. And so the process itself is relatively repeatable, but the nature of what's happening inside it could be doing all sorts of things. So you can say to it, right, I am categorizing things in my email as 5 different things. Every email that comes in, analyze the email and decide which category it is and automatically categorize it. Suddenly, that process is completely automated and there aren't even exceptions. Like it's not going to get it 100% right, but it is going to get it right a lot more than you would do if you were doing it manually, and at least much, much faster. And so it will help with, that if that's the sort of process that you're going through, generative AI plus automation opens up the ability to free up such a significant part of your day. And, thinking about sort of impact on the workplace, there are some roles that are extremely repeatable. And the only thing that's different in them is, well, humans are a little bit odd sometimes, or a lot of the time. That's the sort of thing that AI can come and automate really effectively. So the easiest example for this is in like a call center. I don't know if you've ended up interacting with proper AI-powered customer service bots, but it's a really pleasant experience because it does understand what you're saying. It finds a solution, and it's almost instant. So that process of going through, I'm trying to talk to the bot. I'm just trying to guess what the right answer is so that I can actually talk to a human, because I know that my situation is relatively unique. And I know that the right solution is just give me a refund. The AI will understand it and instantly get you to that
Yeah.
process, which is just, it's much more satisfying as an end user. And what has happened in the world of call centers over the last 20 years is that we've introduced more and more scripts and sort of branching trees. So the experience of interacting with a human is frustratingly robotic. That's to the point it's very difficult to tell on
Yeah.
screen, are you talking to a human or a robot?
Mm,
And that's really dissatisfying. And so, I think
mm.
there's maturity around all of this. Things need thinking through from an ethical perspective as well as everything else. But there's a lot of good that can come from it for organizations, for individuals.
I can talk from personal experience on that actually. Um, because I've got an app called Plum. So I'm actually going to do a shout out because it's brilliant, and it's like a saving space app. So it kind of has an algorithm that's linked to my account, and it looks at how much I'm spending, how much is coming in, and then it'll decide how much a week I should save, and then it'll take it out and put it in this kind of pot. Anyway, I had an issue with my like Plum, something in my Plum app. And so I got on the kind of contact customer services. And honestly, I clearly was speaking to kind of like an AI bot, but the resolution for the issue that I had was within like less than a minute. And actually, it was like super efficient, super clear. It got me the answer that I wanted, and the whole thing was sorted within like, yeah, less than a minute. And I actually was like, that's amazing customer service. And then it wasn't until I stepped away, I was thinking, oh my goodness, I don't think I actually was speaking to like anybody like a human online. It clearly was a bot, and actually it was a great experience. So now I'm talking to you guys about it, about how everybody should download a Plum app. Um, but it's true, I left that interaction and was like, that was everything I needed and wanted as a customer, and more probably. But that came through technology, that experience. And it was really, really good. So I can definitely talk from personal experience on what you've just said there.
Whereas
Oh,
I've had like cold calls from AI bots and they drive me nuts. So when
you
they're like,
enjoy cold calls from humans.
yeah, no, I enjoy none. So like
Cold
that's the
calls.
thing. But like I don't know, it's there's nothing worse than like, hi, hello, here we go. Hi there. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, there's too long a pause in between that
Hang
hi
up.
and my response. I'm pretty certain this is a cold call.
Mm,
So yeah, but no, it is interesting, and I think I've had some really positive customer service experience with the bots that are just the text language, the typing ones.
mm,
They're always really useful, and they always get you to somebody if they don't think they can answer it super quickly. So those are very efficient, and it's that still that interaction. It has a human sense to it. It's just not voice, it's words, but still has that impact. I think that's where this is interesting about AI in general, Sam, because in a way, because of chat GPT and its acceleration in use and notoriety, it's as though we're talking about AI as though it's new, and it's not new at all. And actually, it's been there in the background doing a lot of things for us and with us that possibly, I know in my naivety and my complete lack of technology understanding, probably wouldn't have realised was AI. I wouldn't have thought of it as that. I think the generative AI, I was making notes actually while you were talking because I didn't realise the distinction and I wasn't making one. Definitely that more process AI that's, like you said, like rules-based, structured, process-driven, has that quite rigid input and direction around how it operates. That's been around and working in many different forms for a long time, but
mm,
it's possibly just not one I was consciously aware of or thinking of as AI.
mm.
And that it's kind of interesting when I think of it like that, because then I think, well, actually it's been helping me and supporting me in lots of things I've done over these past few decades without me really knowing it in that way. And and actually there's been some huge benefits, and if that suddenly just got taken away, I'd be really annoyed about it. So I think that's quite interesting in itself. It exists in lots of guises that we're not necessarily consciously acknowledging already.
Yes, the flip side to all of this is that rules-based, process-driven edge of the spectrum is much easier to control. It's much less that can go wrong. It's 100% predictable. You know, if you create that process, it's going to work exactly the same every single time. There are no exceptions, none.
Yeah.
So, you know, like I said, my background started in the world of technology risk. There was this example where if you were to go and check people's passwords to make sure they're secure, you could have an organization with hundreds of thousands of employees. But if you check in the settings, what does a password need to contain? You check that once and you have validated it against all 100,000 plus employees in one test, because it's automated. You can't go against the rule. The rule is there, it's set.
Yeah.
Whereas with generative AI, it isn't. You know, even though it's close, it might be close 99.99999% of the time, but there's always going to be the risk that it's going to do something that's a little bit unpredictable at some point. You know, it's going to make up a piece of information that it actually doesn't have access to, hallucinate. You know, it's going to miscategorize something. I don't know, it's going to just suddenly go off the rails and do something that's a little bit odd. And it's extremely difficult to root cause analysis that, because it's predictive. It isn't based on data. It's not like the chatbot where going to a data table and has understood your request and then gives you a stock answer. It's providing a response based on all of the context that it has access to, and it's effectively guessing. It's not actually great. So you don't want to be using generative AI to calculate your taxes. It will get it wrong.
Yeah.
But to summarize a text into a couple of sentences, it'll do that super well. It'll do it differently every time you ask it to, and it'll catch on different nuances. But, well, you know, that little phrase, good enough, in some tasks, good enough is good enough.
Yeah.
In others, then you need it to be 100%.
Yeah.
So yeah, if we can just embrace the imperfections of some elements of that generative AI, we'll probably end up benefiting more as a whole. Yeah.
Yeah, fascinating. Because I know, like in the world of healthcare, you know, its potential, not necessarily generative AI, but its potential around assisting with diagnosis and assisting with living with chronic health conditions, of which I'm an example. So, like right here, I've got my insulin pump because I'm type 1 diabetic. I got this, you know, less than a year ago. This talks to the sensor on my arm, which talks to the pump on my tummy, which holds insulin, which is, you know, got an algorithm in it, which is predicting my typical day. So how much insulin I need in the background. Has got ratios programmed into it to, you know, looking, because it's had a data set over time to look at how much insulin I need when I have breakfast, when I have lunch, when I have dinner. But all of a sudden, my diabetic overall control is much, much better with the aid of this tool and this technology than it was when it was just purely human intervention, i.e. me, calculating, keeping track of everything. You know, the benefit it's had on my life and will have on my overall health, you know, in the longer term is amazing, and it is a really positive thing. And, you know, not everybody also, I'm aware, not all type 1 diabetics get the opportunity to have, you know, that technology. But I can see how, and as a patient, I can see in healthcare with certain uses of AI in certain contexts, it's phenomenal, you know, the benefit.
Look, healthcare is like the perfect example of this, because like cancer diagnosis, this is the textbook example. AI is able to predict cancer more accurately than humans can.
Wow, really? I did not.
Oh yeah, by a country mile.
Wow. Okay.
So, but it does make mistakes.
Yeah.
Now, humans make mistakes as well, but when a human makes a mistake, you can point at that person and say, well, this is why it was a mistake made. There was a logic that was followed. When an AI does it, there's no real record of why it made the mistake. So even though you know that over the overall population, we would get a better outcome if we were to use AI. For the individuals who get the bad assessment, they think they have it and they actually haven't, or they get told by the AI, you definitely haven't got it, and it turns out that they do. In those instances, then what do we do? It comes back to this second, what do you then trust the AI to make decisions over? The rule in healthcare is do no harm. Well, in this case, we know it's going to cause some people harm, and we know that overall it's going to be delivering more benefit. Should we do it then? At the moment, we're not. It's like, self-driving cars. People crash cars. There's loads of car road accidents all the time. AI's certainly can drive better than humans. They can. There will be less crashes, but there would still be some.
Yeah.
And in those instances, then what? Because you don't want to be figuring that out after somebody has died.
Yeah.
And people have. There's at least one incident where a self-driving car has killed someone. So, that sort of thing just really needs thinking through a little bit better. It's a bigger impact than just, oh, well, I've scored myself 6 out of 10 for ambition and you've scored me 8. That's not so important when it's in critical stuff. Then it sort of highlights. It's worth informing ourselves about what's possible, what's sensible, and then making good decisions around how we're going to adopt it and respond when it's kind of forced on us.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned there about impact, and I think you mentioned in that article that we referenced in the Coaching Perspectives magazine that the workplace now is different to what it was even 5 years ago, let alone 10, 15. So thinking about moving forward with the workplace. So I suppose in some ways this could be quite hard to answer this question, the future of the workplace and what that looks like. But I suppose what should leaders maybe be focusing on in terms of developing skills within their people to get everybody kind of ready, but get everybody, I suppose, ready to kind of embrace the future of what the workplace could look like, whatever that is. Is there any kind of areas in particular?
Well, I think the world of technology is one in which there's lots of different sorts of tech all being developed simultaneously. And then they go through these little spikes where we notice, Google has just released their Glass. Do you remember Google Glass that came out of 2010, 2012, something like that? And then it disappeared. It sort of went through this little hype and then disappeared because they were too early on the VR headset, basically, idea. But that's catching up again. Generative AI has been around in the background for a long time. That book that I mentioned, I wrote it in 2020. It's called How to Thrive as a Coach in a Digital World. You should all buy it. It's very good. But I wrote in there, in the introduction, I referenced GPT-3, which was this thing that nobody had heard of unless you're a real nerd like me. And then it was 2022, I think, November 22, when ChatGPT released GPT-3 in a publicly accessible format, and suddenly AI was mainstream. It's like, that's been around for a long time. They've been developing it. It had done some stuff, but it just wasn't publicly available, and suddenly it was. And there are other sorts of technologies that are all being worked on simultaneously. And if you're a hyper nerd like me, then you know that wearable devices, VR headsets, and this sort of thing are really getting developed very fast and getting cheaper. Humanoid robotics is a massive deal at the moment, and there's lots of stuff being developed in that space. Biocomputing, computer brain interfaces, there's some really exciting stuff happening in that sort of space. Quantum computing is getting faster and faster and cheaper. Blockchain technology is going to become a massive thing at a certain point. Centralization of technology. Only this last week, we've seen the massive outage because one piece of tech went down because of a chip, and it impacted everything. When it's decentralized, that doesn't happen. So blockchain and Web 3.0, alongside your sort of metaverse, spatial computing world, and generative artificial intelligence, when all of these start to combine with each other, then there's going to be constant, rapid, significant disruptive change. And so the sorts of approaches that we need to take as leaders, as people within organizations, within society as a whole, I think need to be sort of ready to deal with that, and making sure that we are clear around sort of what our ethics are and what legacy we're going to be leaving behind. Because if we're acting reactively out of fear or ambition or self-protection or whatever it is that sort of drives us in those cases, we're going to look back at the way we acted and go, oh, we probably should have done that a little bit differently. And so for me, there are sort of four pillars to this, where it's wisdom, integrity, kindness, and bravery, where I think we sort of need to keep checking ourselves around, is what I'm doing something I'm going to be really proud of having done when I'm telling my kids about what I did when this technology launched? Was I being brave? Was I being a person of integrity? Was I acting with wisdom? Was I doing something that is kind? And I think if we're doing that, and the people in our organizations are doing that, I think the future's pretty bright for us. But it does take conscious effort.
And we've got Keanu Reeves and Lawrence Fishburne there to be able to say to us, we did tell you so, when it all goes tits up.
There we go. There we go. Yeah. Ah, yeah. There we go. That shows the age, doesn't
it? Yeah. I mean, any opportunity to throw a Matrix reference into the podcast at any point. But yeah, they'll tell us. They'll be like, we did tell you guys. Didn't listen.
Didn't listen.
You didn't listen. I love that though, Sam. I love that. Because I think that's still demonstrating that there's so much human in this. It's not just tech, it's not just machine. Actually, we're building it, it's taking parts of us, and there's a human lens to always apply to it. And that's important to use as the compass always.
Yeah, and the technology that is most attractive is when it makes us more human.
Yeah.
So we, use the example of that sort of customer service assistant. When humans are acting like robots, we don't like it. When
exactly.
become more human, and they are more human than interacting with a human, that's better. So virtual reality, there's a really great video you can watch online. It's the Lex Friedman podcast, episode number 398. Not that I'm obsessed with it. He interviews Mark Zuckerberg in the metaverse while they are inhabiting avatars in a sort of three-dimensional space wearing headsets. And as soon as you see it, you only need to watch the first minute. As soon as you see it, you instantly discover, oh, meetings in VR are so much better than video conferencing. So much better. There is no competition. It's better. And the reason it's better is that the technology doesn't feel present. The person does.
Got you.
Wow.
And when we lean into technology that allows us to be more human, that really excites me. And there's a lot of technology that has been around, in the early 2000s, where it's like, I'm having to operate according to the rules of the tech. And the exciting thing about generative AI is you can talk to it as if it is this teenager sitting next to you. Just get on and do this piece of work, and it will do it. That you should read the book. I should mention, I've written a book called Next Generation Leadership, which is thinking about, how should we respond to the challenges of today? But it's in the form of a poem against a background of artwork generated by AI. So it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. But
okay.
People will be interesting.
Oh, that is cool. Yeah.
That is cool. We'll put have you got some links and things? We'll put some links in our show notes for people to
I'll send you links.
Send them over.
Send them over. And I'm sure
20 pages. 20 pages of links. Get ChatGPT to pick the top 3 that fulfill the objectives.
Absolutely. So last question then, Sam, and a question we ask all of our guests that come on the Coaching Cast. What are your top tips for our listeners, who we fondly nickname our CBBs, in navigating, I suppose, this rapidly changing landscape that we've talked about today?
I think the number one tip is just get hyper curious, because there's so much technology that is out there. I mean, honestly, I'm discovering new products every single day, must be. And So there's always going to be something that is new out there. You will always discover something that nobody else that you know has discovered just by looking. And some of it is going to be super helpful. You might find, if you're that person that categorizes your emails, you might find that thing that allows you to free up 30 minutes a day by an AI doing it on your behalf. Something like that might be really helpful. And
Yeah.
even if you don't find something that you like, the fact that you've put the effort into discovering what is out there will allow you to sort of protect yourself against the point at which somebody then imposes it on you. So virtual reality is the example of this for me. There will become a point where meeting as avatars becomes more mainstream, and we will receive our first message from somebody saying, here's my VR link, I'll see you at the meeting at 1. And if we've already had a little look into that and had a little play, then we go, oh, right, today's the day. That's fun. If we haven't done that, it will throw us into this reactive, rug been pulled out from
Yeah.
our feet sort of state. And that's just a bad place for us to be in psychologically.
Yeah.
Yeah, get curious, sign up to my newsletter. That's a good place. Yeah, we'll be good.
Brilliant. Okay. I'm definitely going to go and check out this avatar piece for
Yeah,
meetings.
me too.
I'm curious about understanding more about that and that YouTube video, and seeing that come to life, definitely. All right, Sam, listen, it's been a fascinating conversation. I've learned so much. I knew I would coming into this conversation, but yeah, it's been really thought-provoking. So thank you so much for joining us on the Coaching Cast today.
It's been great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sam. I feel slightly less fearful, and more in a space of, as you said, I've got to follow your advice and just get hyper curious. And I think just get out and start trying stuff. I think this is it. It's like you don't know what you don't know, and the unknown can be, I think, what's scary. I think I still have quite an old school view as well of tech, of like, oh, I've got to put a lot into it to get it to work for me like I want to. And actually, I don't think that's true of generative AI at all. So actually, I think I need to start just using it as a bit of a playground, have a go,
Yeah.
see what comes of it.
And I need to start categorizing my emails.
But yeah, thank you so much, Sam. Honestly, really pleased to have you here with us and for you sharing all your knowledge and experience.
Yeah, thank you, Sam.
Great.
We are coming to the end of today's episode, where we've been discussing technology and its impact on the future of the workplace and leadership, and also probably just of general society, the world, the planet, healthcare. It's been a fascinating conversation.
Not enough time, unfortunately, but yes, brilliant.
So, Sam's top tips from our conversation with him today are: number one, get hyper curious about technology. So, just get in that mindset of seeking to understand and finding out what's possible. Number two, go out and discover and then get comfortable with it so that when those things kind of happen or they start to come into your world, like meetings with avatars, they're not forced on you and you don't then panic. You're like, oh, I knew about this. I understand this. And actually, this is really exciting. So yeah, go and have a try and discover. And number three, being human with technology. So just applying that human lens where you can with the use of technology and the role of technology as well, and allow us to be even better as humans. So particularly important when we're thinking about AI as well. So those are the top tips from Sam's episode today. Don't worry if you're out on your dog walk and you think, I can't remember these. All of our top tips for this episode will be on our Instagram page at the Coaching Cast this week.
And talking of episodes, we will have another new episode for you next month in early September on the importance of language in business. CBBS, we know you are busy, but it would mean the world to us if you could rate, review, and subscribe to the Coaching Cast wherever you listen. It takes just seconds and it's free to do, and it just really helps people to come and find us. You could also tell a person in your community, whether that is a friend, a family member, a work colleague, who you think this podcast would be of interest to and could help right now. pass it on, send them a link or a specific episode. It really helps us and the podcast to grow.
Before we sign off from today's episode, we like to end each episode of the Coaching Cast with our personal song recommendation. And it's my choice this week. And I have chosen Ask and You Shall Receive by Rita Ora. It's her brand new song. Again, another Radio 2 classic. I get all of my song input from. Go and put it on now. It's an absolute banger. I love it. So that's it from us. We'll see you next month, CBBS. And remember, you've got this.